Thanks, everybody. So we are what stands between you and lunch, but fear not. We have a great discussion for you on a topic that's really important, right? So how do you acquire top talent to get them into your brand to drive it forward? So quick introduction. My name's Alexandra, AVP of Enterprise Sales at Braze. We have some Braze customers here today, which is awesome. But for those of you who are not familiar, Braze is a customer engagement platform, which really forges connections between brands and the consumers that love them. So very excited to be here with folks from Liberty Mutual and MassMutual, Spencer and Cliff. So we'd love for you to do an introduction and tell us a little bit about your respective roles.
Now is it on? There we go. I'm Spencer Deadrick. I'm head of creative at MassMutual. I have been at MassMutual for about 2 3/4 years. Started right in the teeth of COVID, which was very weird. But I spent many, many years at agencies, local and national agencies. At MassMutual, I'm responsible for the outward articulation of our brand and its products, and for a lot of the work that we do for internal constituencies.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cliff Stevens. I'm the VP Managing Director of Copper Giants, which is the in-house agency at Liberty Mutual. We handle about 80% of the consumer-facing work for the brand. My role is basically overseeing that group. So, whether it's our teams with our Executive Creative Director, Bill Gerard, who's in the audience today, overseeing our creative work, to our project management teams, production, design studio, and operations. We're about a 30-person team. I've been at Liberty for about 5 years. And prior to that, I had the pleasure of working with this guy next to me at Hill Holiday, where we, cut our teeth on the bank at one point. And since then, I've been at agencies throughout my career for most of my time, and then made this move in-house back in 2017.
Full disclosure, Cliff was an account guy. I was a creative director, so we've yelled at each other.
Just a little bit.
In hallways. So.
We figured it's going to be easier to do this. So.
Okay, no yelling here, please. We take that outside. Well, I think a great place to start really is to talk about how the landscape of creative talent has, really changed and is continuing to accelerate, particularly with the rise of in-house agencies. You both have experience of that, so I'd love to get your perspective on what you attribute that to and a little bit about your journeys as well.
Sure, I can start. So I think, in-house agencies have been around for 20, 30 years, right? And so I think it's really been fast-tracked in the last, call it 5 to 10, for a number of reasons. One is just talent mobility and the idea of creatives and teams wanting, and the creative mind to want new opportunities and what that looks like. I think you look at it from also a perspective of the idea of work-life balance, right? When the external agency environment gets, tough, and you have that burnout factor, so there's something else there. And then the reality is that the in-house teams have also started to scale their value, right? A lot of times, when I interview someone to come to Copper Giants, I usually ask a cliche question that's like, hey, what would stop you from coming to work here? And a lot of times it's like, well, I don't want to work on one brand. And then it really becomes about what that value that you can provide to that person at this point in their career. So I think there's just been a very big investment in it, and you're starting to see that people want to be able to work differently, and it depends on what the model is at those in-house agencies and what the value they can get back in that moment in time.
Great. I think that if you had told me 10 years ago I'd be on the client side, I would have said that you were wrong. But I do know, speaking on behalf of creative people, to put it as simply as I can, they want to do good work. I mean, it comes down to that, not just from a career standpoint, putting good work into your portfolio, but for who you are as a creative person. You want to do work that makes an impact, that is powerful, that is interesting and engaging, and yes, that furthers your career. And I think that the fact that client-side agencies, in-house agencies, are doing some of the best work in the country right now is really is the reason why I'm here, and it's because I think that to have the opportunity to work on a brand the size and scope and history of MassMutual was an opportunity that I didn't really want to pass up. And I think that good work is good work, whether it's agency side or client side. It comes down to that.
Right, and I know, Spencer, when you and I spoke before, and personally I think talent brand is really important. It's just an extension of your existing brand. But You've been doing a lot of work on kind of building a brand within a brand and your own team's identity with a very clear vision. I'd love for you just to share a little bit of that with the audience.
Yep. So our in-house capabilities within MassMutual, we're called the 258 Creative Group. And 258 is the exact compass heading between Boston and Springfield. And it really connotes the unity that we feel with our brethren out in Springfield, a bunch of whom are here today. And as far as, you know, I was talking to Ali and saying, we have, I wouldn't call it a mantra as some folks earlier today, but it's something that I feel very strongly about as a vision for our group, and it's really 3 very simple sentences. And it is, we want to do work that we're proud of with people we like and learn from and have fun doing it. And everything that we do can fit into those 3 categories. Everything from KPIs, everything from diversity and inclusion to education to our culture, to how we interact with each other, to the power of the brand and how we bring it to life. And everything can fall into those. It may seem very simple, but it's really just a statement of how I feel that our in-house group can operate.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, right, it's not easy hiring. Most people here are trying to hire at some point. Cliff, I'd love to hear, what are some of the challenges you're finding, and maybe especially in kind of those more pragmatic areas, like where you've got an objective of driving operational efficiency. What have you been struggling with, and how have you overcome that?
Yeah, when I got to Liberty Mutual back in 2017, we were the creative group, right? And so the creative group was a great group of people. I knew my predecessor, which was really nice, and it was an awesome creative director that I had the pleasure of working with before. But there wasn't a true north, right? Like there wasn't a vision of like, what could this agency be? There was an idea of like, hey, we want to do exactly whatever other in-house agency wants to do. We want to be able to get people close to the brand, share data, like all of the intricacies, and also cut costs, right? Like there was a moment of expense savings. But there was the best ask for that was, well, what can this thing really be, and how do you build a best-in-class agency, which is super cliche, and you want to be able to say, okay, what can that look like? And so how we overcome some of those challenges of those stages of like our value in the organization was we set a true north. We said, could we ever get good enough to rival any other external agency out there with our capabilities so we can handle any challenge that Liberty Mutual comes to us? And it's a Fortune 100 company that spends almost $1 billion in media and advertising. So it's like a decent amount of work that you're going to cover. And then the flip side of this is, can we actually provide a value back to our people? And so that true north was, let's get good enough where we can actually offer and know our work really well at Liberty Mutual, and then flip it and say, hey, when we've got some down periods, can we do an external offering, right? And so a lot of people go, wait, what does that really mean? But that value, knowing that we'd be able to attract really good talent, which is not the sexiest of opportunities to work on an insurance brand, even though there's a big range, now they can come in and work at Liberty Mutual, and they might be able to have a project or 2 a year, but that's outside of that work. And so that really helped us overcome a lot of those challenges, which is recruiting, retaining, onboarding, understanding our project workflow, and understanding all those components. So it really was about setting that vision and really building it like year over year and what that looked like.
Great. Do you want to add anything to that, Spencer?
Yeah, I think when I was interviewing with Jen Halloran a few years ago, we were talking about the vision for the group and the brand, and I said, and I still believe this, that my goal is to continue to build an in-house capability that can go toe-to-toe with any out-of-house capability. Now, the reality is 258 going to be able to go toe-to-toe, with some of the best agencies in the country? I don't know, but I know that that's my goal. If Jen comes into my office and says, we have an opportunity to do X or Y, let's call it Super Bowl spot, can your team do that? I want to be able to look at her and say, absolutely, we'll get you something, in a couple weeks. Again, do I think we're there yet? No, and I think that we might not ever be as good as Gray, our out-of-house agency, but yeah, we will. Hell with, screw them. I want to get to a point where we have the bench strength and the firepower to really be able to go up against them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, today really exemplifies this, but the marketing, brand, advertising space, it's a pretty close-knit community, right? Most people know each other or have worked together in some capacity before. How are, those relationships or even reputation kind of informing your hiring strategy?
Yeah, Spencer and I obviously know each other from a deep history, and as I look out in the room, I can see at least like 20 people that I've either worked with, or something like that. So, and it's really tight, and especially in this area specifically. And a lot of it has to do with your work ethic and what it looks like. So when we start about that, we hire great people for like what they're going to add to the team. It's not necessarily the skill sets that they might have. It might be like how they, go about their work. And so for us, what's nice that's actually happened recently is that you can start to tap into those talent pools, not just in the New England and Boston area for a very headquarter-based agency. We can actually look at people in New York and Chicago, but it comes with where's their reputation related to that work. And I think that starts with, Spencer and I have chatted like, hey, do you know some good people here? There's probably 2 other people in this room that have been like, hey, we're looking for these capabilities. Where do you get that sorts of trust? And it might have started with Spencer and I, working on the bank for so many years and going through the trenches to kind of understand like what that value is that we could provide. And are there other like-minded people out there? So I think, to be honest, there's the beauty of what's happening in the industry is that there's a lot of opportunities out there. And I think it's finding the right ones for those people and helping them navigate. I take a lot of calls in a given week to just chat about what this world looks like, right? Because people still have a lot of questions, even though there's been a bunch of in-house agencies that are crazy established. But a lot of it is like, how do I navigate that? How do I break into the brand side? And it just takes leaders taking a little extra moment to say, hey, well, this is what the opportunity can provide. This is what it can do for your career. So I think I do see it being a huge or like larger talent pool that you can tap into. It's just a matter of, can I call Spencer or could I call Will or, Bill or, someone else or Caitlin and say, hey, like, what do you think of these people and where are they coming from? And, do you think they'd add value to our team and can you help provide an opportunity? So.
For sure. And I'd love your perspective on, obviously we've been through a crazy couple of years that still, continue to evolve. But what are you hearing from candidates in terms of, their requirements and motivations and maybe how that shifted?
Start on that one?
Meaning,
yeah, I guess
balance.
so, post-pandemic, people have been working remotely, which, creative folks like to do, but maybe you're hearing that work-life balance is more important to people, flexibility, maybe people are more interested in companies' values, for example.
Yeah.
Anything that's kind of changed?
Well, I do think that, I'm not really stating anything super revelatory here, but during the pandemic, I think a lot of people got kind of introspective and looked at their life and looked at their careers and looked at their values and said, what do I want and how can I make changes to my career or my life that can provide me with better balance? And I think that, it's no secret that agencies are pretty crazy in terms of hours, in terms of nights and weekends. And that's why, with all due respect to Cliff and what they're doing at Copper Giants, I'm not so sure whether or not, even if Jen would bless it, if I would ever want to build a capability that would do work for outside clients, because I like being the client. And I don't want to get a phone call on a Friday saying, can I see the work on Monday? I want to make that phone call that says, can I see the work on Monday? So also, frankly, we have our hands full doing work for MassMutual right now, if I'm being honest. But I think that I think people just looked at everything a little bit differently, and they rearranged their priorities and acted accordingly. That, and apparently I'm a lot taller in person than I appear on Zoom, is something that I learned. So I have to work on posture or something, because when I first met everybody for the first time after working with them for a year, it was like, oh, you're way taller than I thought. So
I saw Spencer at Hash. I thought he got shorter, but that's okay. So I think there's talent. I kind of believe in talent cycles of where people are going, right? Like if you see the rise of the in-house agency the last 5 years, if you think about that diversity of our platforms and everything out there, there's just this plethora of that. And I believe that in the last 2 years, similar to the same values-based moment, you're also seeing a very generational-based moment happening right now too, right? So I get a lot of feedback and listening to some of my most junior people in my team be like, is this a job or is this a career, right? And I think there's a very different dynamic in how you evaluate that where people see value. Some people literally just want to come in 9 to 5 and do an awesome job, and they expect their double bonus based on like crushing it straight 8 hours. But if you call them after 5 o'clock to do something, it's like, that's my time. And there's a balance as a leader to say, well, can I get the best out of you from a productivity during those 8 hours? Or can I provide you with something else that inspires you to do something differently? And that's part of our responsibility. And then the flip side of this is the in-house outside. I don't care where people work, right? If we've got the right culture and you've created that environment, I think we were fortunate that with our 30 people, the majority of us knew each other before we went home. And so that helped us. And so it's hard to build culture, to feel like you fit in. So then it becomes on the leaders to say, hey, if you've got new people, how do you onboard them, right? How do they feel about joining the team? Can you fly them in for meet and greets? So I think where people are looking at this right now is They're deciding what they're trying to do. It's up to the leaders to say, hey, what's the culture we want to provide behind it? And for us as Copper Giants, we just said, look, we're just going to be honest and transparent and stay connected as best as possible and be accountable. I think that's the other part that I think people probably were worried about is, oh, if you're at home and the cliche-based moments of like, if you're in your sweatpants, are you really like paying attention? Are you watching Netflix? Well, just be accountable. And if the work is there and you're seeing increase in productivity, then that is working, right? And so we look at productivity metrics on a regular basis and how does that then provide, development opportunities for others? So.
Yeah, and I think Don from Chewy kind of referenced it. If you hire the right people who want to do the work, right, they'll get it done and be motivated to do that. But also, I think ping pong tables and beanbags just don't cut it anymore, right? That's not what people want. But you made a nice segue into culture, which is becoming increasingly important, and I think particularly in-house as well. How are you assessing who's going to come in and not necessarily fit into your culture, but add to it?
Meaning from a hiring standpoint?
Yeah, so maybe you're bringing people from agency side in-house, and there's very different cultures within those worlds. How are you trying to assess who's going to be the right fit for your business and what they can bring to it?
Well, I think from a creative standpoint, we have the benefit of something tangible, and that's looking at someone's portfolio. And that's the first thing we look at. And if the work's good enough, then we start talking to them about the intangibles. And life's too short to work with idiots, and you don't want to deal with prima donnas. And I don't care how good someone's work is. If they're not going to fit in from like a cultural standpoint, check your ego at the door, that kind of thing, then we're not going to hire them. I do think it is a relatively small market, to Cliff's point, and people get reputations, and it's more art than science, I think, when you're interviewing somebody, trying to see how they're going to fit with the team that already exists, trying to see how they're going to interact with folks. Also, to Cliff's point, working on the client side from an agency side is different. If I'm hiring somebody from the agency side, I want to make sure that they're well aware of all the intricacies and the idiosyncrasies of working on the client side. No two companies, no two institutions are the same. So I will be kind of, overly truthful and sort of warts and all kind of stuff.
I'd say more simply put, we just have a no asshole policy. Right? It is. We actually talk about that directly of how will this person fit in. And usually when we go even through the interview process, if it's someone on our team, I trust my team, right? I've got to trust their judgment of Spencer's going to have a better creative eye, or Bill's going to have a better creative eye based on that book, just given my account-based background. I can support that. But if my creative director's like, hey, this person's got a great book, and then my project managers and producers who are on those panels as part of that interview process say, hey, I think this person's really going to get it and understand it. And then I want them meeting with a few of my marketing partners, right? What's Liberty really like? Are you ready for this conversation? And then the flip of that is also just what that onboarding process really looks like. Can we make sure that this person feels like they are really brought in and not just handed a portfolio of something of here's all the org charts you need to know. So I think we're pretty methodical about that at Liberty, especially with making sure people feel super valued right from the get-go of the interview process. And you can see horror stories on LinkedIn of I went through 13 rounds and they didn't even call me back. And that is just a filter of we will never do that on our side. And so when Liberty has fallen down in that recruiting process, we've taken it over on our own. And so we'll just literally set up those calls and those meetings so that there's a cadence for that person, because that's also our reputation on the line. Right? I want someone who at least might not get the job to get a call from me later and say, hey, here's why, right? That's important, so they don't go, well, Copper Giants is a bunch of assholes. But they're good people, and I would want to work there. That's important for us because that helps us retain talent, it helps us recruit talent, and it's also people that we might know. So we kind of lean into that because we see that as if you're going to be part of this group and actually be part of this culture, it also has the flip on the backside. We expect you also to show up, right? We want you to join our get-togethers when it's time and participate when you can, or if you can't, no worries. But I think there's really kind of that focus on let's make sure these are the right people, and I'll kind of entrust my team of hey, do you feel like they've got the capabilities that we've kind of set out to do?
I want it to be noticed that the account guy said asshole, not the creative person. So
I was going to say many years of. I was kidding.
No, duly noted.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more, right? We're all here talking about the level of investment that we've put in brands, and your talent brand, right, is now front and center and out there in the world. So really important to protect that through candidate experience. And certainly at Braze, we've made some adjustments to try and assess for culture fit by, giving candidates the opportunity to speak to their peers, right, to understand what kind of environment they're going to be working in and not feel like that's being sold by a hiring manager. So super beneficial. I think something that is really top of mind for most people and super important to move a brand forward, modernize a brand, and avoid things like groupthink is diversity and inclusion. So we'd love just to hear a little bit about that and how you're thinking about that in your hiring strategies.
Well, I think that, from two different standpoints, diversity and inclusion is super important. One, it's the right thing to do, but secondly, maybe more importantly, in the context of a business, it's the smart thing to do. And as a creative, the number one thing that you have to do is put yourself in the shoes of your customer, right? You have to understand their hopes, their dreams, their wants, their needs, and the best way to do that is to have a workforce that represents what the outside world looks like. So, that's the goal. Are we there yet? No, I don't think so. I think we can always get better, but there's that. The biggest reason for that is you want to be able to speak to them and understand them.
I'd say, yeah, it's very conscious. I mean, we have open conversations about this, about the diversity of our teams and what can add value. And I think there's not only just the DE&I, it's the diversity of thought, which is also the input that we actually use as filters. But one of the things that we've talked about is, hey, we're Liberty Mutual. It's a 125-year-old company, and it's like, in theory, at surface level, is a bunch of old white guys, right? And that's something that we as an in-house creative agency can have an impact on. And Liberty's making strides across this, which we love. And I think they're really trying to make sure that they're doing the right by to their customers, to the people there, so you feel represented and included. I think it's hard at a big company like that to actually have those rich conversations, but the beauty of it in our agency side, because most of us are external agencies, experience, can sit down and have rich conversations about that and actually say, hey, what are the right people and where are we leaning into this? So I'd say it's a regular conversation across our teams on a regular basis, where it's not like we're going to go have a DE&I conversation, which I think is where it becomes inauthentic. It's more of just like, are we doing the right thing by all the people around us, and do we have the right representation across? And do we make sure, even in our hiring process, that we actually have a diverse candidate pool? Like, that's something that will stop a progress if we realize, like, hey, are we just talking to ourselves? And we have that open conversation on a pretty regular basis. And I love that our leadership is kind of naturally having that as well, because I think that's important for our industry. I think that's important for growth. And I especially think it's really important for our younger folk to want to look up to leaders that say, hey, that's important to me as much as it is to you. So.
Yeah, I definitely think generationally, it's something that's more important for candidates. And I think I agree with you. It's the intentionality of making sure that you've got a diverse candidate pool and actually going that extra step to think, well, what channels do we need to actually attract those candidates to be in the mix? So part of this topic is about modernizing brands, and things are always changing at lightning speed. So would love to hear a little bit about, as we head towards the end of this decade, what new skills do you think you're going to need to hire for, and how are you trying to anticipate for that?
Again, from a creative standpoint, I think the skills are going to stay the same. It's where the work is going to go is probably going to continue to change. And I think making sure that we reflect that and we stay on top of whatever platforms and whatever channels are working best. But at the end of the day, conceptual excellence, the ability to take what might be a relatively dry brief and turn it into something that's super engaging and powerful and can connect with, not from a brand to a consumer base, but from one human being to another human being at eye level, and showing a level of humility and acknowledgement of our role in our customers' lives is something that we will always look for. And looking at portfolios and looking at the work that a potential hire has done, it will reflect that. And yes, I want to see and make sure that obviously, and it's 2022, that digital literacy is something that is table stakes at this point. But so I think that the level of conceptual thinking is going to stay the same. It's where it's going to go. It's going to change.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, just to add to that, it's hard to predict our marketing future and what is going to be the next new platform, media space, what that could look like. Is it metaverse today? It's now not metaverse, depending on which Ad Age article you read in a given week and what's happening out there. So I think for us, we're constantly at the place of, how do we consistently learn in all these spaces on top of the day-to-day work? And that's why we created that external offering, right? Like that's why we wanted our teams to be able to work on something outside of Liberty Mutual so they can actually use that knowledge, create inspiration, and then vice versa. And it has a reciprocal relationship with the 80% of the work that we manage in those 300 to 500 projects in a given year. And then also that creative brain to keep it going, right? Like that's important for us to think about it, and we can learn from it. So I'd say for the future state on this, I get asked this a lot because I'm on the marketing board at Suffolk, and a lot of the professors are like, or what are the skill sets that we should really put into our curriculum here? And a lot of the conversations are usually about like UX and design-based thinking, and how that's actually, almost part of the conceptual word, and it's not just a studio model anymore, and there's a lot of technology and data that's associated with that. And I do think that's important. I think you need to be, to steal Spencer's words, digital literacy is critical for your advancement, but the ability to also be really understanding of what we create and understand and dissect that from a strategy perspective, from a conceptual side, those sound like soft skills, but they're actually end up being hard skills of where you can interpret that so that you can adapt to that environment, right? Like if you had asked us, 10 years ago, would we be thinking about another digital world, right, that people are talking about right now with NFTs and Bitcoin, like just that whole world, you'd be like, that just feels like a bad video game. And the reality is that is literally could be another stage of the next evolution of our world. So I think it's about how do you prepare for that? How do you keep those brains and teams excited about what they're working on so that when they get that chance to say, hey, we're going to have you work on NFTs, they're like, all right, what's this new thing and how do I tackle this, right? Like that's what I'd want them to have is that skill set so that it could be the next opportunity and then seeing what value it provides.
Great. We're going to do one more so we can get these folks off to lunch on time, which I can see is going to be ready. But to end on a warm and fuzzy note, I'd just love to hear parting thoughts on what you found most rewarding about hiring great talent and developing their careers.
To be honest, this is going to be super cliche, so you guys can make fun of me later or say, but I mean, I think it's the most rewarding part. It literally is the most rewarding part of my job is when I feel like I've helped someone get to the next phase of their career. Like I've done my job. I really do believe that. Like as a leader in these different experiences, that's why I came to Liberty is like, how can I help shape this team and lean into my team and listen to them? And if I can get all of my directs up promoted within the 5 years that I'm there, then I'm doing my job. If I get that junior person to, scale up and suddenly they've gotten another job where they got picked up by Wayfair, I've done it. So for me, that's exciting, and I like those calls. Like I like that person when someone leaves or comes like, hey, I got popped up. Don Lane just picked up one of our creative directors. Like that's awesome. Like that's a great opportunity where we're like, hey, it's so good for you that you were an ACD and now you're a CD, and this is where you actually had that moment because we couldn't provide that, or we couldn't do something differently to get you to that next level just because of our structure and teams and what we're looking at. So I get super proud when people leave on such a high note, and we unfortunately haven't had anyone leave like really angrily recently, so that's been good too. So,
what about you, Spencer?
I think I just want to. One of the things that it's not just about attracting top talent; it's also about leveraging the talent that already exists. And I was really fortunate to inherit a team that was called Studio M before it became 258, and 99% of the people within that group were not operating at their top speed, not through anything of their own device. It's because, and I've been so happy and proud and excited to see the work that can be created when you kind of unleash people. And then on the other hand, hiring a group of people from the outside to kind of bring in new blood and bring agency level thinking and combining it. There's a bit of an alchemy there that's hard to pin down, but what happens is kind of interesting, and I think we're just getting started. And I think that it is about the relationships that you have with people and being able to connect on a human level while you're working. I have a Will Uronis story too, for what it's worth, and that is, I was looking for a lead art director to come in, and Will was my partner at Hill Holiday, a really talented art director, and so I called him and said, hey, I'm looking for this person, and who do you know that would be good for it? And Will said, what about me? And so it was great, and so he's been here, and we've been able to bring in other folks with disparate backgrounds and different ways of thinking, and again, combining it with what we already have. And I think it is just the cliche of the sum being greater than the parts.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure people will ask you questions as we head to lunch. A round of applause.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.